at what could be Labour's last chance to rally party members ahead of the next general election. Later, the party's leader in Scotland, Anas Sarwar, will address delegates fresh off the back of a thumping by-election victory in Rutherglen and Hamilton West, with a clear warning to SNP MPs: you could lose your seat next. So the party clearly has a spring in its step, but can we read too much into one victory in a very specific set of circumstances? Let's ask an expert in Labour campaigns. Lord Peter Mandelson was a key architect in the success of the party, which it experienced under Tony Blair and Gordon Brown. Good morning to you, Lord Mandelson.
Good morning, Laura. Nice to be with you.
Thank you for joining us. Many in the party have described last week's victory in Rutherglen and Hamilton West as seismic. Certainly a big event on the day, but how much do you read into that event in terms of any future success?
Well, I read quite a lot into it, and I celebrated it. I'd been up in Rutherglen, I campaigned, worked for Labour's success there. And I think it's a very important launch pad for us. I think it looks increasingly as if Scottish Labour will deliver seats to build a UK Labour majority in the next Parliament after the election. But I think importantly, in return, a Labour government, should it be formed, must then deliver to Scotland and the Scottish people ahead of the Holyrood elections in 2026. And that's got to be the basis, in my view, of our appeal, of our project. And I'm very clear that, for Labour as a whole to strengthen its appeal in Scotland, we need to present a convincing economic growth plan to benefit the whole of the UK, including Scotland, and that's something the SNP can't do. We've got to be genuine, not reluctant devolutionists. I think we've got to offer greater freedom of action and reform both within and between the nations and regions of the UK, so as to deliver more for the Scottish people. But I think also we've got to demonstrate how we're going to rebuild, how in the UK we're going to rebuild our relationship with Europe. How are we going to hold our heads up and become a moral force in the world again? And I think all these elements.
Do you think Sir Keir Starmer needs to be? Sorry to interrupt. There's a bit of delay on the line. Do you think he needs to be a wee bit firmer on that, though, because he seems a bit reticent to say too much about Europe at the moment?
No, I think we have to be realistic about Europe. I mean, there is not a door which is opening to us to return into the EU fold. That's perfectly clear. I mean, the European Union doesn't want to mire itself in that sort of miserable negotiation that they had after our last referendum, and the British people themselves don't want to hold another referendum. But there's much more we can do to build a trust and respect between the UK and the European Union.
I wonder if any new Labour government needs to explain exactly what it would do in terms of the sort of what's been described as the democratic deficit in Scotland, that Scotland keeps voting for SNP MPs and SNP MSPs, and yet there seems to be no route to a second independence referendum. Where do you think that any Labour government should go with that next? Given you're going to have to borrow votes from Conservatives and SNP members in order to get anywhere near the seats you need in Scotland.
Well, that's absolutely true. But look, I'll be honest with you, Laura. I think the constitutional question is, I think it's falling in its salience, if I can put it in that way, in Scotland. I don't think it's top of people's agenda in the way.
49% of people still want an independent Scotland. They want to say in a second independence referendum.
Could I finish making my point? I think the saliency of the constitutional question is falling. I don't think it's top of people's agenda. But I do think that support for nationalism in Scotland exceeds support for the SNP. So I don't think we should take a wrong reading from this. But having talked to a lot of SNP, ex-SNP voters when I was in Rutherglen, my feeling about them is that they don't expect Labour to support independence in Scotland, but they do want us to show an empathy towards those who do support independence. And I think that we need to gain a hearing from ex-SNP voters. I think that's going to be very important indeed if we're going to build our support and win the seats that we need at the next election.
You were a big supporter of devolution. Would you suggest maybe showing that empathy by laying out when any future Labour government would think about a second independence referendum?
No, I think I've already made my point that SNP voters, ex-SNP voters, don't really expect Labour to support independence. You know, our priority is to get our future back in the UK as a whole, to rebuild our economy in a responsible and sustainable way, and to create benefits from that across the UK as a whole. I think that's what people want to see as a priority from a next Labour government. And
on that, how quickly do you think Labour would be able to show any movement on those things, given the state of the economy at the moment? You might be inheriting an economy that's not looking the best, for instance.
Well, I think you make a very good point. Look, when we came into office in 1997, Blair, Brown, and the whole of the team, the fact is that the economy was starting to grow then. You know, we had to put our foot down, in a sense, on the economic accelerator rather than reinvent or restart the engine. That's not the same now. You know, the economy is flatlining. Levels of private and public investment are way below what they need to be. National skill levels, infrastructure are in a bad state, and international investor confidence has not recovered from the sort of instability created by Johnson and Truss. Now,
so
the
how do they
point I'm
turn that
making
round?
is that this requires a much bigger growth mission now than the policies we followed in 1997. And this is going to be funded and driven primarily by private capital and by the private sector. But government has got to provide the economic and political stability. We've got to demonstrate that we have the capability and continuity of policy, the pump priming, that only government can provide. We've got to work hand in glove with businesses and with the private sector. And that's what I think you're going to be hearing from Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, today.
And just briefly, are you there to offer support if and when Sir Keir Starmer asks for it?
100%. I'm absolutely behind them. And can I say, I saw Anna Sawar yesterday. I must say, one of the really sort of nice things I see is how well Anas and Keir Starmer get on together. I actually think that Keir Starmer visibly relaxes when he's in Scotland with Anas. They're a great team. Anas will articulate, speak up for and stand up for Scotland's identity and its needs. And Keir Starmer will, in leading the UK Labour Party as a whole, will make sure that we deliver to Scotland should we be elected at the next election.
Peter Mandelson will have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed for joining us this morning. And if he's interested in hearing more from Anna Sawar, he can do so this afternoon, because the Scotland report is being made to conference this afternoon at around about 2:45.